Hey, I'm Riley, and this is a Superhuman podcast. At Superhuman, we bring you cutting edge insights from health experts and high performers to help you unlock your body's full potential, supercharge your mind, and achieve more with less effort. Do you want to fix nagging health issues, boost productivity, spark genius ideas, master stress, build stronger relationships, and increase your income? It all starts with optimizing your inner machinery. My guest today is Jeff Reynolds. Jeff is a CEO, author, and managing director at Sellside Group. He's helped grow, scale, buy, and sell some of the most successful service businesses in the world, managing over 1 billion M&A and scale multiple companies to seven-figure exits. Through PSF Accelerator, he now mentors founders and CEOs on how to scale profitably, lead effectively, and build businesses that not are only great for clients, but also for employees and shareholders. He's passionate about helping leaders shape their legacy and navigate through their journey from growth to succession. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Yeah, great to be here.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you on. And we haven't had somebody who has been really on the finance, M&A side, mergers and acquisitions. And there's a lot of people that are interested in this, but it's very, people watch the movie Wolf of Wall Street or some, like The Big Short and things like this. And it's a pretty cool world to get into. But what was sort of, bring me back to the beginning. How did your journey into M&A start and to kind of like what you're doing today?
Yeah, if you'd have told me when I was 20 years old that I'd be doing what I do today, my first question would have been, huh? What is that? And I certainly wouldn't have guessed that was going to be my career. So I'm from the Midwest, originally decided I was going to go do a PhD in human development and spent a bunch of years at Northwestern in Chicago. It turned out I wasn't going to be a very good academic, so then I had to find a career and found marketing. Ended up joining a marketing firm right after I got married, moved to Los Angeles. It was about a 100-person firm. It was 30 years old. And then I ended up having a wonderful 17-year career there that at some point, about a third of the way through, I started running the company. And about 2/3 of the way through, we ultimately sold the business to get the founder out. He was almost 70 years old. We sold the business for well north of $100 million. And all of a sudden now the buyer was private equity. And I didn't know that much about it. And so again, you go to school in the world of leadership and try to get yourself oriented. And the next thing you know, we bought 10 businesses over that next 5 years. I exited that business, joined in with another group of private equity investors, ended up buying another 7 businesses. And so here it is 10 years later, a guy that's never had a business class in his entire life, never had a finance class, has issued $1 billion worth of outstanding offers and spent, $350 or $400 million to acquire 17 businesses. And so now I'm in this position where I spend my time sort of advising CEOs on growth strategies or exit strategies, or in my role at Sellside, represent those businesses when they want to go to market and sort of take their life of work and turn it into some liquidity for their family or some growth opportunities through strategic partnerships. So it's about as circuitous of a possible story as possible. But it's been an amazing journey of learning and growth, and some failures and challenges along the way too.
Oh, I'm sure. And I think that speaks to the lessons. I mean, like that's pure experience without having to do all that theory. And I just keep hearing that time and time again, just taking action, course correcting, hit your head against the wall. And you've helped a lot of businesses scale to the 9-figure level. What are some of those core levers that you have found separates certain companies from other ones to grow exponentially or plateau?
Yeah. So particularly in services businesses, which is really where I've made my mark, right? Where you're really scaling people, the people deliver the value, right? It's not manufacturing, it's not software. And so the intermingling of the product, which is the people, and the people you need to scale, I think creates kind of a different environment for scaling people-based businesses. And so the idea that my grounding in social science theory, my grounding in human behavior, I think was always a real help for me. And so then when I look at like what makes the difference, the challenge with almost every service business is that the founder of that business is good at the thing, whether that be marketing or architecture or consulting or Salesforce implementation, whatever that service business is. The person that starts it usually has a pretty good amount of chutzpah to be an entrepreneur. They're really good at that thing. and maybe they have enough leadership skills to get some people to join them and some sales skills to get some clients. But what happens is then, 5 years later, when they're at 30 people or 50 people, their job is
Yes.
no longer about the thing. Their
Mhm.
job is about being a business leader that is sales and marketing and accountability and building a leadership team and building a staff and developing people. And that becomes such a different job than the thing they were originally good at. And so
Yeah.
the ones that really scale from there, I think one can really recognize that difference. And so
Mhm.
that's a big thing to realize. I got to learn a bunch of new stuff.
Mhm.
Two, they accept. There's a very famous HBR Harvard Business Review article called "The Founder's Dilemma," and the main question is: do you want to be a king or do you want to be rich? And
Mm.
the king thing is, when you're an entrepreneur, it's pretty nice to be the top dog, to control everybody, but if you want to be rich, if you want to scale, if you want to have good leaders join your business and stay in your business, then you can't try to be a king and just have everybody come and bow their knee. You got to become a real leader. And
Yeah.
so that willingness to understand you got to learn a lot, the willingness to not want to be king, and then really
Nice.
getting help, both in the form of maybe people you bring in or help you do it because you can't do everything yourself, or getting outside help. One of the things that I used was I was just a voracious reader, and every time I didn't know what the
Mhm.
heck I was doing, I always figured, well, there's probably somebody who's thought about this, and so I was a guy that who my mentors were. Some of those mentors were books and articles, and I just kept
Nice.
trying to get a little bit of ideas, and then go out on the front line and wing it.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It reminds me of a Tim Ferriss. When I was listening to his podcast probably 10 years ago, I never forget when he said there's just in case information and just in time information. And the just in case is, well, I'm going to read this book because maybe one day in the future I'm going to have to use it. Versus just in time, as you have problems, as you're taking action, you read the information that you need. And like that's the most important thing. But the other thing you mentioned is, yeah, what made you good before isn't going to be what's going to get you the next level now or in the future. And that transition must be really difficult for a lot of people.
I think it is because it's always this judgment call, because there's maybe a set of principles or a way of working that's at the core of why you've been effective, why the business is effective, and you might even say there are pillars that should live on in perpetuity because it's what we do. At the same
Mhm.
time, you got to make the distinctions between there were ways of working that were great then but not great now, and so those things need to change. And that's really a judgment call of a leader to figure out what are those things that are bedrocks of us versus those things that have to adapt, and then turning it on themselves as well. What are the things
Mhm.
that are, kind of principles of mine versus maybe I'm being rigid and not understanding how to think about a problem differently. I recently have been working with a CEO who was a little bit reluctant maybe to become a CEO because they had a part of the business that they just didn't enjoy doing as well. And part of my coaching was, I said, well, and the person that had been the CEO before them maybe was very good at that part of it. And I said, hey, you don't
Mhm.
have to be able to do everything. If you're the CEO and that part you don't get excited about, or it doesn't power you every day, you get to go hire someone to do that, and then as a team, like, those things happen. And so
Mhm.
it's a mindset of not kind of knowing what, thinking about this podcast and human performance, like what gets you fired up in the morning, what mission, what work, what type of activity, like trying to figure out when you're a leader, like that's the stuff I should be doing. And the stuff that drains me or that other people are better at, like, let me get help to do that, but figure out how to hold them accountable, and the team gets it there. And when you're small, you don't have the money to do that maybe, and you got to be a but as you get bigger, like, you can really just build that complementarity in the
Mhm.
team to accomplish the mission. And, that's an acknowledgement that you're not good at everything. You're not going to try to control
Totally.
everything, and you can get other people to help you.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to, for example, like selling a business, what do you find most founders get wrong when preparing for an exit, and how early should they start planning?
Let's see. So I'd say that the two things that come to mind are around leadership and leadership succession, and around building a sustainable revenue generation engine. And so
Mm.
what I have found is that if you want to sell a business effectively and get Both maximum value, the right partner that fits with your own goals for your organization, maybe beyond when you know have the full control of it. Um, and in just building something that's sustainable, you need a next generation of leadership underneath
Mm,
you. And to build real leaders underneath you, you actually then have to give them domain and accountability and authority, which means you control them less. Back to the
mhm,
king versus the rich.
mhm,
And that's a hard thing to do. But if you develop those leaders, A, it'll probably help the business be more successful. But then when you want to go exit, the folks looking at your business will say, I'm very
mm,
confident investing in this business because I'm not writing a check for the business to a guy that if he leaves or she leaves, you know, the business is going to fall apart. There's a real leadership team there.
mhm,
And, you know, founders working inside of the next company or investors that acquire them, it's pretty different for a
mhm,
lot of those founders to get a boss. And so those investors are smart. They know that even though somebody may have goodwill plan to stick around and keep running that business, sometimes it's hard for those founders to get a boss. So if they've got that next layer, so that
mm,
leadership development piece, building
yeah,
real leaders that work for you is one area that I think they underestimate. And that can be a 3 to 5 year planning cycle to have those right
mhm,
leaders in place, whether that's hiring or developing, giving them a chance to start doing it, training them, ultimately giving them control, letting them demonstrate that they can lead. You know, that's not 6 months before you decide to take your business to market. So that's one thing.
mhm,
And then the second thing is oftentimes, particularly at smaller levels, you know, you pull together a great group. You were great at the craft of whatever you did. You build that into the culture, and clients love you. They refer you out to their friends, or they leave their company, go to another company, bring you over. And
mm,
so, you know, you can get a real kind of referral business because you do great work, but that
mm,
always caps out at some point. And in part because continuing 10% growth, the number gets bigger every year. And so you have to build a real revenue generation system that's a combination of sales and marketing. And I see
mhm,
that I see it as it's often one of the most distinctive skills that they don't have because they've never been a professional sales manager, or they haven't even wanted to think of themselves as a salesperson. As
mhm,
well as it takes time and energy and resources and metrics and all sorts of things to build out those sales and marketing systems. And that takes some investment, and they don't make it, or they don't try. Or what I've seen a bunch of times, they try once and hire an outside salesperson, and they aren't successful. And then they're once
mhm,
bitten, twice shy. Well, I'm never going to spend that 150,000 again. But then all of a sudden the
yeah.
revenue line doesn't move, and they're sort of stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, as you know, all this stuff probably doesn't come very intuitively to a lot of people naturally. So, either one, read a book, or definitely listen to this podcast so you don't make these mistakes along the way. How about a little bit as a side tangent? People who already sell a business, a lot of clients I work with that already sold their business and they feel like they lost meaning in their lives. I think they love the thing, like, it gave them so much purpose, but, being able to sell it and the lifestyle it would give them, there's only so many days you can sit on a beach. There's only so many days you can travel before you wanna, like, find that purpose again and, like, whatever drives you. Have you seen that, like, within this industry, or would you have any, like, advice for founders of, like, trying to find that purpose again after they did sell their business?
Yeah. No, this is a real issue, particularly for
Yeah.
folks that find fast success and find themselves with a valuable business at, let's just say, 40, that they truly can monetize. I uh,
Mhm.
I think I think culture. I think there's so many of them that chase the dollar, but they maybe don't
Yeah.
reflect and realize it's that journey, it's that fight, it's that
Mhm.
vision that's actually the thing that's satisfying, even though you think the bogeyman out there is something about your income or the value of the business. And so there's three
Mhm.
things you lose when you sell a business. One,
Mm.
particularly once you exit, you lose a mission that
Yeah.
drove you probably at the dead center of your soul.
Yeah.
Two, you lose your day to day environment. It's who you work
Mhm.
with and what you do and the practices and habits of the stuff. And then you lose a set of relationships that you've probably built over time that are meaningful to you. And all of a sudden you're on the sidelines with a Mai Tai in Tahiti, and those things are gone. And
Yeah.
and so, it's real. And I just think the
Yeah.
dollar is so seductive, and it's understandable. I've been
Yeah.
a long time part of YPO, Young Presidents Organization, where there's a lot of very successful young founders. And I've certainly had meaningful discussions or had a chance to witness people get phenomenal exits. And then, it's just not the same. And,
Yeah.
become an investor is a thing, but
Mm.
investing is not operating. And so
Yeah.
is that really going to satisfy you to be sitting back and just placing chips on businesses and
Totally.
hoping those leaders do well? And so it can become a real soul searching. A lot of them find themselves back in the entrepreneurial mode. And by the way, that can
Sure.
be a great thing. So I think it's, I also, the first business that I worked at for 17 years, the founder
Mhm.
exited at age 70. I mean, he'd been there for 45 years. And, and I sometimes wondered, did he sell too slowly? Because by the time he sold, the
Mm.
business had thrown off cash flow forever. He didn't need one bit of the money.
Yeah.
And I've always wondered whether he actually just took the check and put it under his mattress.
Yeah.
Um, and then actually his new problem was he was worried about losing it. Investing in something that was going to go down. He could lose $1 million in a day in a heartbeat. And he was a poor kid from Brooklyn. Uh, and and so I've sort of thought about it from that end too. Although, he came in every day. At some point he wasn't really poring over the details, and he owned it and it
Mhm.
was important to him. So maybe he sold at just the right time. I don't know. So those are some kind of
Yeah.
interesting bookends on it, but I think it is underappreciated that you really need to go deep in thinking about what your plan is and get real on, will that satisfy you? And obviously you can adjust if it's not, but it reminds me a little bit like sometimes people retire and they quickly
Mhm.
move to some place where they thought they wanted to move. And it's like, you've never lived there. You have no relationships there. You had some concept of what retirement was going to be, and you
Totally.
find all of a sudden you're lonely without friends, and you're not, like it can be a
Yeah.
misfire. So, what are the way, so do you build up some meaningful engagement and activities that become the bridge, so that you've got some other things you've got your teeth really sunk into, so that when the work thing
Mhm.
goes away, you have some other meaningful parts of your life. I know that when I left, after 17 years of the company, my involvement in YPO turned out to be a huge thing. And I just really got more engaged in
Mm.
the organization because it was kind of the only thing I belonged to at that point. And it was meaningful to me to be kind of part of a team and part of an organization. So I think those are things that people can think about a little bit more, and not be fooled that the money is going to be sufficient to, if you're 40 years old and you want to live a great long life, you may have 45 or 50 more years on this planet. You need to be excited to get up every day to
Absolutely.
do something.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it must be nice, like for someone like you've gone through it yourself to help younger entrepreneurs. It's almost like seeing your old self and like helping your old self. And I've heard that before, like, it can give older entrepreneurs and people who have done exits like a lot of satisfaction to help the younger guys out who are hitting their heads against the wall. And if only they had the answer, but I guess sometimes they have to learn the lesson the hard way, but that must be really satisfying sometimes.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of how I'm built. And like, if you
Mm.
asked me, what were some of the successes I had as a leader, uh, if you kind of abstracted some of them, what some people would call scaling, I'd call teaching. Like, I'd figure out how to solve some
Mm.
problem for the business. You're like, oh, that worked. Now we just need to scale that out over a whole bunch of people. Well, you scale that by creating ways to train people and skill people. And so I think in some ways, again, back as a guy who originally was going to be an academic, I think I've always been sort of oriented towards sharing and teaching. And so I just find it very satisfying to be at this juncture of my career where, I get to share and they are hard won lessons of sleepless
Hmm.
nights, of I always say nicks, cuts, broken bones, and maybe a few near death experiences. And just, the world progresses maybe when somebody, I do think you have to learn some of it yourself. Like, they're gonna need to touch the hot stove because it's just the only way you're gonna
Sure.
understand that it burns. But maybe a few things go a little better, and the world progresses a little faster because some wisdom has been learned along the way and some people were willing to share it. I think one of the interesting things about services businesses, if you have a tech business, there's this whole ecosystem of support for those founders, in part because they often need to raise some money. So when somebody gives you $5 million of venture money, they also say, by the way, we'd like a seat on the board. But what you call that is smart money. And all of a sudden you've got somebody who's, there, but by the way, that person's probably got some experiences to share. And those tend to be pretty valuable for those young founders. Service businesses are almost always bootstrapped. They don't need to raise money. They didn't have a big capital spend at the beginning of it. And so the system of those doesn't require that you get a board member. And, entrepreneurs are confident people. So I don't need any help. And so I find that to be one of the maybe harder parts of what I have to offer is that there isn't a mechanism to create, when I advise a CEO, I'm often sort of functioning like a board member or a board chair or something like that. But because they don't formally need one, it's just a little harder to get plugged in on that, even though I'd like to think if you talk to my clients that they'd be like, oh, it's just so nice to have somebody who's I can bounce some stuff off of. It's lonely at the top, those kinds of things.
Yeah, beautiful. Love it. Thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge. It was I definitely learned a lot. I'm sure our audience did too. People want to learn more about you. Where can they visit?
Yeah, my advisory business is called the PSF Accelerator, Professional Services Firms Accelerator Program. That's for folks that want to grow and prepare an exit, succession planning, all of that. And so it's at psfaccelerator.com. And you can learn more about me. We can set up time. Love to, get to know folks and see if I can be helpful for them. And then if somebody's looking to sell their business or prepare for a sale, I am, part of an organization called Sell-Side Group, and abilities to connect with me on LinkedIn are there, and we've obviously got information to reach out to me at the website for Sell-Side Group. So that's how you can get in touch.
Cool. Awesome. We'll put all that down in the show notes below. Thank you, Jeff, and thank you everyone for tuning in. I hope you got a lot of value from today's episode. If you are ready to take your health performance to the next level, grab our free Superhuman guide at getsuperhuman.io/playbook. Hit subscribe, share this with someone who needs it, and I'll see you in the next episode. Stay superhuman.